Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eddie Jennings from EJSLLC.com. This video is going to be another in my series about doing practice sessions for the RHCSA exam. Before I dive in, I want to remind you, if you enjoyed the content of the video, make sure you click like. Also subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you can be made aware of new content as it comes available. So this video is another my Red Hat Certified System Administrator practice sessions and is not intended to necessarily be authoritative information on a subject, though I like to think that I know a little bit about what I'm speaking, so that way when I take the exam, I'll do well with it. But the intention of these is to kind of show um, some of my own practice methodology and troubleshooting as well when things go wrong, how I would approach trying to troubleshoot this if I were on the exam. It's also a chance for me to try to explain these concepts so I can test my own knowledge about it. There's a truth to teaching that when you understand something or have a little bit better understanding than just scratching the surface, you're able to teach others about it. So I'm going to attempt to do that here, serving both as practice for me and hopefully usefulness for you watching it. So the objective that I'm going to be exploring in this video is under the Understand and Use Essential Tools section of the RHCSA exam, and it's use input-output redirection. So what input-output redirection is taking what you would normally have on the command line, either at the console window or in a terminal window, and rather than having um, the text display in that terminal window or console window, we're going to send it somewhere else. So let me log into my VM here, choosing to use a GUI VM. Let me see if I can get my password right. Good, otherwise we'd have to have a little impromptu video of regaining access to an account. I'm choosing to use the GUI and getting to a terminal that way just because it tends to make the little resolution for the final video a bit better. But you can do the exact same things from just a straight console window. So I have terminal opened here, and I'm going to do an example here. We're going to ls the var directory. And there are several things that come up when I type ls var. These are all going to be directories. I think that's a symlink, and then a directory that has world read write executed permissions. But what we're seeing is called standard output. It is simply just the text on the screen here. And if we wanted, we can, rather than have this display on our screen, we can redirect this to a file. And to do that, let's say there's an objective on the exam where we need to create a file called varfiles.txt, and the contents of that needs to be the contents of the var directory. Well, to do that, we'll do our command ls/var, and we are going to redirect that, and the operator that we'll use for that is the arrow. We're going to send that to, let's say, varfiles.txt, and press enter. Notice that the list of files and directories did not appear this time in our terminal window. That's because we sent the data to that varfiles.txt. That's what this symbol here did for us. And if I were to cat varfiles.txt, we see, even though it's shaped a little bit different on the screen, the same output. Now this isn't showing, if it's a directory, it's not showing permissions, it's not showing like SE Linux context, anything like that, because we simply did ls. But the concept here is we took what would be coming to standard output, we send it to a file. Pretty easy. Now, what this single arrow is going to do, it's going to either create a new file with whatever data is being redirected, or it's going to overwrite a file. So if I were to do ls etc and redirect that to var files, again, we have nothing coming out to the terminal because we're redirecting all of the standard output to var files. We do clear, and then cat var files. You can see there's a scroll bar has appeared on the side. There's far more stuff in there, and the original var stuff is gone. There we go. That's the beginning of that command. So we have edge time aliases, ALSA. We don't have account ADM cache with this because the single arrow is going to overwrite what we have. Well, we're going to have situations where we don't always want to overwrite. Let's say that you're writing a script, and in this script, when you get to certain parts of the script, you want it to send some standard output to what will effectively be a log file. So let's say you have your little script, and it's going to, actually we can do this right here as an example. So let's we'll call it testlog.sh using good old VI editor, bin bash. And all we're going to do is echo a few statements to a file. So call this log line 1. Now the single arrow, if I do that, and then we'll call it logfile.log, that's going to create logfile.log, and it's going to echo the standard output, which will be log line 1 to that file. Now, if I wanted to, let's say we have stuff going in the script, and then at some point we want to do another entry into the log file, log line 2. If I do the single arrow, just in the example with ls, it's going to overwrite the log file. So what we want to use are 2 arrows, which tells us to append to whatever we're redirecting information. Let's do another echo log line 3, and again we'll append to the log file. We will close this and write. I like using :x for that. And let's give this execute permissions. Right, ls-l, we see that it has execute permissions for testlog.sh, and let's execute testlog.sh. And notice we don't have any output on the screen because all 3 of those commands were using redirection. All right, ls, we have our logfile.log. See that there. Logfile.log. If I were to cat logfile.log, we have our 3 log lines. So that gives you an idea of standard output as far as we can redirect it to a file, we can append to an existing file. Pretty easy stuff. But remember, I mentioned that you have standard output. You also have something called standard error. And as an example here, I'm going to do ls and just some random letters here. That tells us ls cannot access all of that, no such file or directory. Well, even though this is on our terminal screen here, or if I were in the console session, it'll be in the console window, this is not actually standard output. This is called standard error. And just kind of proof positive that it's different, let's do this same ls, bunch of gibberish, and let's redirect that to ls test.txt. And notice there's still something on the screen here. Before, when we were redirecting standard output, nothing was on the screen. Everything was sent to the text file. If I were to cat ls test.txt, there's nothing in there. So what's going on? Well, this is standard error, not standard output, even though it's still outputting to the screen. So how we redirect standard error is we're going to put a 2 in front of our arrow. And what this 2 refers to is something called a file descriptor. Technically, standard output is 1. So we have 2 for standard error. So this time, if I do ls and I put my gibberish there, 2, and the single arrow, ls test.text. Nothing came to the, nothing was output to the terminal window. And if I were to cat ls test.text, we have the standard error in there. So this could be useful if you're doing a script and you want to make a log file, but or maybe not necessarily a log file, but you want it to output whatever errors happened in the script. Well, what you can do is have your various commands and redirect the standard error output to a file. So let's go back to our example. I call that testlog.sh. So let's VI back into that. And this time we're going to use go into insert mode here. So using the to descriptor. Save that. Let's run the script. Now notice we see the echo, we see the output of the echoes, and then if I were to cat that logfile.log, we'll see nothing's in there because standard error was being redirected because of the two arrows, or the number 2 and then the arrows. And since there was no standard error, then literally nothing was written to the file. There are times where you may want to send standard error to standard output. And an example I can think of this is, let's say that you're running a command that might be spitting out lots of errors, and you want to grep for those errors. Well, grep accepts just your good old standard output. So how do we do that? Well, what we can do is, so I'll do ls, I'll do my little gibberish there. We're going to redirect standard error. We're going to do this and 1 or ampersand 1. And what this is doing is taking standard error and sending it to standard output. And so we'll have both standard error and standard output going to standard output. If I were to just hit enter, we see ls cannot access whatever. But another, I guess you can call this form of redirection. I'm not sure if it's technically called redirection. I suppose it is you take the output to a command and pipe it to another command for processing. So if I were to take that and we're redirecting standard error to standard output, and I grep that, I pipe it to grep, and I grep just for ls. Notice ls is in red, grep has returned something. If I were to do the same, but not do any type of redirection, just literally pipe whatever, notice how we see the standard error, but we don't see the highlighting of ls, even though clearly ls is there. That's because there was no standard output that was sent to the pipeline to grep. But using this redirector or redirection, we are sending standard error to standard output, which then comes out or is sent to grep, and then grep has something to actually search, and it found the ls. One other thing I want to show you with this, and this is a little confusing syntax. It's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around it, but after doing this a few times, it does kind of make sense. And let's say that we wanted to redirect both standard error and standard output to a file. All right, so a way we can achieve that, again, let me clear the screen here. We'll use ls and all of our gibberish. We're going to redirect that to a file. We're going to call it ls error and standard.txt. And we're going to tell standard error to go to standard output. So now what we have, if I were to cat ls error standard.txt, we'll see the error message because it was sent to standard output and then that was sent to ls error and standard. You might ask, well, why not just do 2 and the arrow? That'll give you your standard error. True, but let's say that we have a script and we're running this. Let's make another little script here. We'll call this error test .sh. Let's say we have ls var and ls something that we know is going to throw an error. We will make that executable. All right, so we get the output of ls var and standard error. Well, if we wanted to redirect all of that to a file, this is where that syntax comes in handy. So we would have our script, redirect that to script log.log file, and we'll do 2 and 1. And now what we have, if I were to cat script log.log, that gives us everything. Otherwise, if we were to do just 2, or if I were to do error.sh to script log.log, we get the output and only the error went to script log.log. And then likewise, if we did this with just the output redirection, we get the standard error, and script log.log has the ls output. So even though that's some weird syntax, and you can look at the man page for bash, and it explains it a bit. If we wanted to capture both the standard error into standard output, put that to a file, we do whatever the command or script, redirect to file, and then add the 2 and 1 there at the end. One other point in this objective talks about input. Now, I don't have a real good example to show you here. One thing that I do know is you'll often use this. Let's say that you did a dump of MySQL and you want to send that data back into it. This is where you would use it. But let's say that we have a file. Actually, we use scriptlog.log as an example. And what we wanted to do was send that file as input into a command. Well, what we can do here, let's say that we want to send it to the cat command. I could do cat and then the less than sign, script log.log. Now you might ask, why not just do cat script log.log? Yes, you would do that. But just to kind of give you proof positive of input redirection, this is what's happening here. We are redirecting what's in script log.log and sending it into kind of like a funnel cat. And again, the example that I saw when I first learned about this was taking a dump file from MySQL, and let's say you're restoring that database. You would take that dump file and you would use the input redirection to send it to your MySQL application to be able to get that. So a bit long-winded. I'm kind of surprised I've blabbed this long about just input-output redirection, but this kind of shows you what you can do to send output to a file versus actually having it go to the terminal. Also understanding that you have standard output as well as standard error, which look very similar on the command line or in your terminal or console, but in fact are very different as far as how your shell treats that data. And then we took a little look at doing some input redirection as well. Hopefully you found this useful. Maybe I've explained this in a way that you haven't thought of before and it helped something click. Um, if I did, great. I'm glad you benefited from it. As always, if you did enjoy the content, make sure you click like on the video and subscribe to the channel and ring the bell when you do so you know when new content is made available. As always, thank you for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you the next time.